Let's do an impromptu segment. How about that? A little breaking news segment.
Yeah, I already got a graphic.
We have breaking news. Confirmed. First reported by Pete Thamel at Yahoo Sports. Confirmed by our own Mike Craven here at Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Matt Wells has been fired at Texas Tech. I believe after just 3 years. Not even 3 years there. But Matt, he has been fired. Of course, he was the guy who he took over for Tech in 2019, and he took over from Utah State, and put together, let's be honest, a frankly disappointing tenure here.
Yeah.
They go 13-17 in Matt Wells' 30 games there at Texas Tech, and he has now been fired there. Let's talk a little bit about the type of hire that Tech made by bringing in Matt Wells, because it's important to remember that he got brought in because he had helped to build Utah State into a bit of a powerhouse there in the Mountain West. He was brought in coming off of a 10-2 season in 2018. He was a bit of one of those hot names of like, oh, here's this guy at a G5 school that's doing big things. Let's bring him in and take over. Tech is 5-3 this year. I think it's important to remember that they are 5-3, and they have that win over Houston. They've handed Houston their only loss of the year, but obviously it wasn't enough. And I think that it was fair to say that Matt Wells entered the year on the hot seat, and he did basically nothing to assuage them, even though they did go 5-3. But I think the timing of this is curious because. Here's what I think happened. This is I don't have any inside information. I'm reacting just like you guys. I think that Tech is looking at what happened with Les Miles at LSU before he was fired. Because here's what happened with Les Miles, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
Les Miles should have been fired in. I got to make sure I pull this up. Let me make sure I get the timing right here for what happened with Les Miles. Because you remember. At Les Miles, so this was in 2016 or 2015. In 2015, LSU went 9-3, but that's not necessarily telling you the whole story, because what happened was they started off 6-0, and then they rattled off 3 straight losses to Alabama, to Arkansas, which was the real death knell, I thought, and they lost to Ole Miss, and they fell to and they fell down to 7-3, and 7-3. Whatever it was, 8-3 maybe. And what happened is that after those 3 losses, it was pretty much understood that Les Miles was going to get fired. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much understood that Les Miles was going to get fired. But what happened is that they went out there, I guess a couple days after Thanksgiving, and they beat A&M. They beat A&M. They won 19-7. Les Miles got carried off the field and everything. And suddenly, LSU, and then they beat Tech in the bowl game.
Yeah. And
then the LSU brass go, well, I mean, they did just go 9-3. The players obviously love them. The fans love them. We can't fire him. Les Miles coached himself into another year.
Yep.
They gave him an opportunity to save himself. And kind of rally the troops around him, and then he goes in and they go 2-2 and they fire him the next year. Mm-hmm. In the middle of next year, that's when Coach O came.
So it's like rip off the Band-Aid before you get to that point.
I think Tech is making sure that Matt Wells doesn't have an opportunity to save himself.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because here's what comes up next. Because they spit the bid up against Kansas State, right? They've still got to play Oklahoma.
Yep.
They still got to play Oklahoma State. Mm-hmm. They still got to play Baylor.
So you grab one of those wins.
You win one of those games against what's going to be ranked teams, and suddenly the tone of the conversation shifts, because not only do you knock off a ranked team and pull off an upset, but you do so to get bowl eligible.
Yep.
This is Tech making sure Matt Wells doesn't have an opportunity to save his own job.
Yep. They said, we're done with this. We want to be done, and you... they would not have been in this situation had they just beat Kansas State. It looked for most of that game like they would until they absolutely laid down.
They took the opportunity. I mean, look, let's be honest. He's 7-16 in Big 12 play. Okay, the resume and I don't love talking about coaches getting fired because I think it stinks, but the resume does not allow them to keep him on for another year. Okay? Because even if they win out, right? Even if they win out, he would be 11-16 in Big 12 play.
Right.
Now, part of that's not his fault. I think he took over a program that was in dire straits.
He took over a program, too, with a quarterback that should have been great who could not stay healthy.
He has not had a healthy quarterback basically the entire time he's
He
been
hasn't,
there.
yeah, not the entire time.
So it's not entirely his fault, but in the end, like, you are what your record says you are. And he's a 13-17 coach at Texas Tech.
Now, here's a question from the comments that I agree with. Does Tech have too high expectations? Because we always run into this issue talking about Baylor and TCU as well, you know?
So that's a question, right? That Tech has basically had one good spell since the breakup of the Southwest Conference.
Yes.
And that was in the Mike Leach era.
Yes, with Graham Harrell.
When they had Graham Harrell and Michael Crabtree. They had that good spell there with Mike Leach. So there is an importance here to know thyself, right?
Self-awareness.
Also, the Big 12 is going to get a bit of a facelift. And Texas and Oklahoma are leaving. Theoretically, who will be next up to be the favorite in the Big 12? Like the powerhouse in the Big 12?
Yeah.
Oklahoma State?
Maybe.
Baylor? Right? I think Tech is maybe looking at this and saying, all right, in a shifting landscape, maybe we can find a way to be that team.
Yeah.
Now, history would suggest that Tech can't be that team. That's not me being mean. That's just the reality of the situation. They have not been able to do that and establish themselves as a consistent power in whatever program or whatever conference they've been. But I think that Tech is looking at the situation and saying, we don't believe that Matt Wells is the guy who can get us to that point where we can fill the void that's going to be left by Texas.
Right, because, we
want to go out there and get a guy who can.
They've been fine shooting for third place every year.
Yes.
You know, like that's kind of what the goal has been. And it's like
being like the team you don't want to play. Being like
they're the team that can come up and literally muck up any situation. Like that's what they've always been in the Big 12.
So the Matt Wells era is over. We don't have word yet on who's going to take over on the interim basis. But let's talk about names because that's what everybody wants to talk about. And let's talk about a bit the kind of hire that Matt Wells was. We mentioned that he was successful at they did the old get a good G5 coach
because Utah State was
and promote him, right? They kind of did that with Tommy Tuberville as well, right? A little bit different, obviously, because he was coming off of his run at Auburn. He was at Cincinnati at the time, whatever. Here is what... here are the names that are going to get kicked around a lot. And it's kind of in that same vein.
I think there's two big ones.
The two big names are going to be Jeff Traylor at UTSA, and they're going to be Sonny Dykes at SMU.
Yes.
Both of whom are undefeated. Both of whom are having great years. Sonny Dykes obviously has a pretty tight relationship to Tech because his dad coached there and he's an alum. But he also has, but I will just say this. In the shifting landscape of the conference realignment, where now the UTSA and SMU are going to be in the American Athletic Conference.
Yes.
Now, the American Athletic Conference is no longer going to be the best non-power conference because that's going to be the Big 12.
Yeah.
Right? And arguably, there's other conferences, the Sun Belt's really making waves. But it could be considered a move up to go from the American Athletic Conference to the Big 12.
Yeah.
But I also don't think, I'll say this, I also don't think that leap is as big as it used to be in a prestige perspective.
No, not at all. And that's what's crazy to think about is I'm sure, right, it's just we're in that awkward gray area where it's like, oh, yeah, everyone knows, the Big 12, this is Power 5, this is blue blood of college football. And now it's like, is it though?
Right.
But we're not there yet is the other issue.
Well, now there's something else to remember here, okay? And let's be honest about this. So Sonny Dykes is making $3.5 million at SMU. Okay? He's making $3.5 million at SMU. Doing pretty well.
Pretty penny.
Matt Wells is making 3.6. They're basically making the same amount.
Yeah.
Okay? So Sonny Dykes would have to want to go to Tech because there's not a monetary they're not going to fork out the five, they'll have to give him a little bit of a raise.
Yeah.
But that would be theoretically where Tech is going to live as far as the financials are concerned.
And you've got to look at recruiting at that point.
Sure.
Because if you're making the same amount of money here and you're housed in the DFW, why do you necessarily want to go to Lubbock?
Here's the other one. The other one's Jeff Traylor. Jeff Traylor is making $800,000. Okay? That would be a significant leap as far as his financial well-being,
like
if he
2.5.
Go, right. If he were to go and just match Matt Wells' pay, or even take a small, less than what Matt Wells made, right?
Mm-hmm. Say we'll start you at 3 and then we'll talk after next season.
That would still be tripling his pay.
Right.
That's going to be interesting. There is also going to be some talk of Jeff Traylor staying at UTSA for a couple more years. Mm-hmm. To see if there's something even bigger than that. And you've seen that happen. Guys like Billy Napier have done that. So this cuts both ways.
Yeah.
This cuts both ways because you're exactly right. There's the Billy Napier thing. Billy Napier is the coach at Louisiana. Mm-hmm. He's definitely had offers from jobs, and I think he's just biding his time.
Right.
He's biding his time. He likes where he's at. He's biding his time.
Because that big Power 5 that you're not going to want to turn away from is going to come at some point.
There's also
with Seth Luttrell, which was he got the offer from Kansas State and turned it down, and then
now he's going to get fired.
Yep.
And now he's going to get fired. He had his opportunity. He didn't jump off the ship when he should have.
Should have, yeah. And that's one of those things. When do you ever know if that's the right time?
You don't. So the other option, that would be the typical hire a G5 head coach type thing. But let's also remember who was the coach that he took that Matt Wells took over for. He took over for Cliff Kingsbury. Mm-hmm. Cliff Kingsbury was a hot assistant. Mm-hmm. Okay, he was an offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M, who had helped Johnny Manziel win a Heisman.
Yep.
He goes back home. Obviously, it doesn't work out there, right? It's working out okay in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Are there guys like that? Because think about this. That's the path that Baylor just went.
Yep.
When they hired Dave Aranda.
Yeah, you go for the big-time defense.
Right.
Which Tech would go for big-time offensive coordinator somewhere, historically speaking. What about Graham Harrell?
Graham Harrell. Or would that be too on the nose with what's going on with Cliff Kingsbury? Mm-hmm. I will just say this. I think that this is maybe the most important hire that Texas Tech is going to make. For a while, because of the shifting landscapes, because of the way the conference realignment is going right now, that the game has changed, and I think that Tech can't miss on this one. Mm-mm. Tech has got to find a guy that it's going to work for them. Now, a lot of good reasons to go a few different ways, right? If you were asking me right now, my first call is to Jeff Traylor, my second call is to Sonny Dykes, and then at that point, maybe you open up the search a little bit further. We're going to find out. It's going to be very interesting because Tech is in a position where they can make a leap as far as where their spot in the conference pecking order, but they can't swing and miss on this.
Well, and the other thing that makes this such a unique scenario is it doesn't always happen this way where something like this happens, and realistically, the guys that we think have the biggest shot to take it are other head FBS coaches in the state of Texas. That makes this whole thing, because obviously if that happens, then there's the ripple effect of, okay, well, where does UTSA go? Where does SMU go?
Absolutely.
You know?
There's a lot more to come. But a domino has certainly fallen. Mike Craven at Dave Campbell's Texas Football has confirmed the report from Pete Thamel at Yahoo Sports that Matt Wells has been fired at Texas Tech, rounding out his 13-17 career there with the Red Raiders.
Thanks so much for watching that video. If you would like more and to be notified when they come out, go ahead and click that subscribe button right down there. You can also watch Texas Football Today every day live at noon on TexasFootball.com, Facebook, Twitch, and right here on YouTube. For more of the best coverage of Texas football in the Lone Star State, go to TexasFootball.com/subscribe.